Rudo is an ugly, broke, and friendless boy who spends most of his time rummaging through the trash in the rich part of town. One day, he notices a rich lady discard a trash bag with a perfectly good doll in it, and he wants it, so he heads down to the trash collection site and sneaks into one of the garbage rooms so he can start looking for any valuables. However, he was a bit too sloppy with his approach because he gets spotted by one of the guards, and the people here must take their trash very seriously because the guard immediately runs in there and draws his gun on Rudo. Only authorized personnel are allowed to be in here. And once he realizes that Rudo is a trash raider, the guard sounds the alarm to call for reinforcements. Rudo doesn't plan to stick around any longer, so he jumps into the trash chute and climbs his way back up so he can get out of here, but the lockdown sequence has already been initiated, so just as he was about to escape, the front gate gets sealed off. The guards eventually catch up to Rudo, and as soon as they have a clear line of sight, they open fire without hesitation. All because they don't want him looking through their trash. As the shots are heading straight for Rudo, he locks in and begins moving so fast that he is able to dodge the bullets point blank. But keep in mind, the guards had no idea he could move fast enough to dodge bullets, so they genuinely wanted to kill him over trash. Rudo manages to slip through one of the open doors and runs out into the loading area while the guards continue shooting at him. At one point, he gets grazed on the arm by a bullet, but he is still able to make it over the wall to escape the trash collection compound. The guard continues chasing after him, but Rudo manages to stay hidden in the sewer system until the coast is clear, but he doesn't understand why they are willing to go so far to stop him from going through the trash when he isn't hurting anyone. Morning comes and people all over the city have heard the news of the recent trash raid, and they are appalled at the idea of the dirty tribesfolk going through the stuff they've thrown away. In this city, the people are divided into two sections: the city dwellers who live in the clean and pristine part of town, and then there's the tribesfolk who live in the filthy part of town. The news of the trash raid is a hot topic here as well, but everyone in this part of town already knows Rudo must have been behind it, mostly because he is currently fixing up all the junk he collected last night. A few moments later, Rudo is confronted by his friend Chua, and she yells at him for going trash raiding again. The city folk are really strict about their trash management, so there's no telling what they'd do to Rudo if they ever caught him in the act. Rudo understands that what he did was risky, but he doesn't think it's fair how the rich and wealthy are always throwing away things that are still perfectly usable. Plus, selling the fixed junk helps him cover his living expenses out here. Thus then, a group of guys show up, and they immediately start insulting Rudo unprovoked. They tell Chua that she shouldn't hang around a loser like him so much, and Rudo is doing his best to stay calm, but they keep pushing his limits. One of them even knocks over the lantern that Rudo was fixing and tells him no one is ever going to buy something that was touched by Rudo's filthy hands. After all, they say he's the son of a homicidal maniac. Rudo has been trying to ignore their insults for a while now, but that last comment about his father really struck a nerve with him. The boys keep talking and explain that these slums were originally created as a prison for criminals, and now as the children of those criminals, all of them have to be on their best behavior in hopes of redeeming themselves and being allowed to rejoin the city. But people like Rudo's father screwed it up for everyone by going on a killing spree. The boy has been talking a lot of shit for someone within drop-kicking range, and that last statement officially crossed the line, so Rudo stares at him with a look that means he's about to crash out. He and Rudo look at them with such animosity scares them so bad that they realize it'd be a bad idea to keep messing with him, so they all just slowly walk away. Once they are gone, Rudo silently goes to pick up the lantern that they kicked over since he's used to getting ridiculed for no reason, but to his surprise, Chua is still standing by his side. She even tells him she believes he's a good person, and that's the nicest thing anyone has ever said to him, so he doesn't know how to react. Just then, Chua notices the toy that Rudo fixed up, and she absolutely loves it. She's impressed that Rudo was able to find something so cute in the trash and fix it up. The whole reason Rudo went after the doll in the first place was to give it to Chua as a present, so he is happy to hear that she likes it, but before he could explain that it's a gift, Chua's mother shows up and tells her it's time to go home. Chua gets up and says goodbye to Rudo before walking home with her mother, and Rudo is disappointed that he missed his chance to confess. After that, Rudo heads home too, but as soon as he gets inside, he finds Recto standing there with a wide smile on his face. He was spying on Rudo earlier, so he looks him dead in the eyes and repeats Rudo's failed confession word for word. Rudo gets flustered and yells that spying on his private moments isn't cool, but that aside, Recto wants to talk about that little trash raid stunt Rudo pulled last night. Recto admits that they are poor, but they aren't poor enough for Rudo to need to risk his life looking for valuable junk. Rudo insists that it's not that risky since he has never been caught before, but Recto points out that Rudo was spotted last night and he nearly got captured. Recto understands that Rudo is only trying to pay him back for everything he has done for him since they aren't related by blood, but as far as Recto is concerned, Rudo is his son, so he doesn't need to pay him back for anything. Recto found Rudo abandoned as a baby and took him in as his own, and he has always known that Recto saw him as family, so it's not like he feels guilty or anything. He just wanted to show some respect by helping him out a little as family. Just then, Recto spots the wound on Rudo's arm and asks if he got shot yesterday. Rudo tries to deny it, but it's obvious that his arm is injured, so Recto tells him to roll up his sleeve so he can treat it. And while he's at it, he says he will change the bandages on Rudo's arm. Once he is done treating Rudo's wound, he reminds him to stay away from the trash site from now on because next time he might not be lucky enough to come out of it with minor injuries. Rudo assures Recto that he really is fine because compared to the wounds that his biological father left him with, a little scratch on his shoulder isn't a big deal. The mood shifts as soon as Rudo mentions his father because it's not a fun topic to discuss. In this city, major crimes are punished with an immediate death sentence and offenders are dropped into the pit without a second thought. Rudo's father was thrown into the pit for the crimes he committed, and Recto doesn't want the same to happen to Rudo, so he asks him to be more careful from now on. Rudo's hands have been pitch black for as long as he can remember, and as if that wasn't bad enough, he occasionally gets episodes of crippling pain from them. People have always looked at him with disdain upon seeing his injury, but Recto was different. He gave Rudo a set of gloves that helped manage the pain he felt, and Rudo has treasured them ever since. All that aside, Recto tells Rudo that he had better make a move on Chua soon, otherwise someone else might win her over before he gets the chance to confess, but Rudo really doesn't want to talk about that right now. But while Recto and Rudo are busy bickering inside, a mysterious masked man is standing outside and staring at their house ominously. The next morning, Rudo is trying to learn to smile since Recto told him it would make him more approachable, but after practicing for a few minutes, Rudo realizes he's just plain ugly, so no amount of smiling is going to help. However, he does still want to give Chua the doll, so he decides to head over to her house. On his way, he thinks about the pit and how it is considered a huge trash dump both literally and figuratively. All the city's trash is thrown in there, and anyone caught committing a crime and deemed useless to society ends up in there as well. Public executions are held like this fairly often, but Rudo has always wondered what actually happens when someone is sent down there. Just then, Chua happens to show up and she thinks it's awful how people get thrown into the pit all the time. From what she has heard, the slums were built on the edge of the city specifically to remind all the tribus folk that if they step out of line, then they'll be thrown in the pit without question. Everyone who lives here has no choice but to watch as more and more people get thrown in there, but Chaiwa really doesn't want that to happen to him. She understands that he doesn't agree with how the rich people waste perfectly good stuff, but if he continues putting himself in danger like that, then it will only be a matter of time before he gets caught. Rudo laughs a little because Recto said the same thing to him last night in Chua. That's probably because Recto loves Rudo just as much as she does. Rudo continues laughing for a second, but then it dawns on him that Chua just said she loves him, and as soon as Chua realizes what she said, she gets flustered and starts trying to explain that she didn't mean it in a weird way. This is the best chance Rudo is ever going to get, so he holds out the doll and tells Chua that he got this for her because he thought she might like it. Chua is overjoyed by the thoughtful gift and tells Rudo that she'll treasure it forever, but this went way better than Rudo expected, so he isn't sure how to react right now. He eventually decides to run off before his ugly face makes Chua change her mind, and now that he has finally made progress, he wants to go home and tell Recto all about it. However, as he is running around the corner, he accidentally bumps into a bunch of guards from the inner city, and they barely even acknowledge his existence before walking past him like a piece of trash. Apostles showing up in the slums is never a good sign, but right now, Rudo couldn't care less about that because he needs to go brag to Recto about his love life. He eventually makes it home, but as soon as he opens the door, to his absolute horror, he finds the masked man with a sword plunged into Recto's chest. The masked man pauses for a moment out of surprise at Rudo's sudden appearance, but then he goes back to what he was doing and pushes the sword deeper into Recto's chest. Rudo refuses to let Recto die in front of him, so he tries fighting the masked man off, but in less than a second, he ends up slammed against the wall and barely able to move. He got beaten so badly that he doesn't even remember how it happened, and the masked man is barely even acknowledging Rudo as a threat. He's fairly certain that Recto won't survive now, so the masked man slowly gets up and begins walking out the door. Rudo doesn't want to let him get away, so he yells at the murderer to stop, but that doesn't work, so he tries mustering up as much strength as he can so he will be able to chase after him. However, he suddenly hears Recto trying to speak, and helping Recto takes priority over getting revenge right now, so Rudo rushes over to his side. He tries to assure Recto that he will get help, but there's not much that can be done when you've got a sword sticking out of your chest, so Recto grabs his shirt and tells him to get out of here as fast as he can. Rudo doesn't understand why Recto would say that, but a moment later, he gets shot in the back by a taser and is pinned to the ground by the city guards. They accuse him of murdering Recto, and no matter how much Rudo tries to explain that he isn't the one who was responsible for this, they refuse to listen to him, and one of them even punches Rudo until he goes unconscious. By the time Rudo wakes up, he finds himself tied to the execution stand dangling over the pit, while an apostle condemns him for a crime he didn't commit. The people of the slums already didn't like Rudo, so none of them oppose his execution. But Rudo is left wondering how things could have ended up this way. He didn't do anything wrong, yet dozens of people are currently yelling for his execution. He looks out into the crowd, pleading for someone to believe that he is innocent, but all the faces he sees are looking at him with nothing but contempt. He then spots Chua, and she may be the only one who would ever believe in his innocence, so he tries calling out to her and explaining that he wasn't the one who killed Recto. He asks her to help find the real killer so he can prove his innocence, but Chuwa cuts him off and she says she was a fool to ever believe that someone like Rudo could be more than a filthy murderer, and now she wants nothing to do with him ever again. As Rudo watches Chuwa walk away from him, he realizes that he is truly alone now, but then, just as he is about to be dropped, he sees a familiar face in the crowd. The face of the man who killed Recto, and in that moment, he swears to himself that he's going to kill that guy along with all the people who turned their backs on him. The next time Rudo opens his eyes, he finds himself laying in a pile of trash and obviously stinks, but he is more surprised that he's still alive down here since he thought the pit was supposed to be a death sentence. He looks up and sees vast expanses of wastelands as far as the eye can see, but then he hears a loud rumbling sound coming from behind him. And when he turns around to see the giant trash monster staring him down, he realizes this isn't just a regular pit. This is hell. Rudo starts running for his life, but the trash monster calls for backup, and within moments he is surrounded by 2 more of them. He is still struggling to believe what he's seeing because since when could giant piles of trash come to life and attack you? However, the situation is very real, and the human skull he finds on the ground shows him exactly what's going to happen to him if he doesn't act quickly. Just then, the trash pile below Rudo's feet gives way, so he falls to a lower level, and that fall really hurt. The wind was knocked out of his lungs when he hit the ground, but the air here smells worse than a moldy gym bag, so he can barely breathe. He realizes he needs to find somewhere to hide before the monsters get to him. But after looking around, there's literally nothing but trash here, so there's no safe place. Rudo is starting to lose hope and believes he's going to end up dying no matter what he does. But then he remembers what Recto had said to him before he died, and Rudo refuses to let himself die before he has made them all pay for what they did. The people who looked down on him as trash, the cowards that watched as he was thrown into the pit, and most of all, the bastard that killed Recto in cold blood. One of the trash monsters tries to sneak attack Rudo while he's mid-monologue, but he's filled with so much rage that he smacks the monster's head away with a metal pipe. Meanwhile, on a nearby trash pile, a man spots Rudo on the other side of the trash field, and he is curious about him. Rudo is doing his best to fight back against the monsters, but his metal pipe isn't doing much damage to their trash bodies, so he gets swatted away and bounces off the floor multiple times. Eventually, he gets his hands on a broken stop sign, so he chucks it at the trash monster and he manages to do some decent damage to it. But with all the toxic air here, Rudo can't keep fighting like this forever. The 2 trash monsters see that Rudo is struggling to get back up, so they both decide to charge at the same time. However, just before they could hit him, Rudo grabs a piece of sheet metal, and with it, he slices one of the trash monsters clean in half, resulting in a huge trash explosion. Rudo is relieved that he was able to take down the trash monster, but unfortunately, it's not over yet because another trash monster spawns right in front of him, and this one is much bigger than the others, so Rudo has no choice but to run for his life. The monster slams into the ground and Rudo is sent flying before landing right in front of the man who was watching him. He is confused upon first seeing the man, but he still can't breathe properly with the stench in the air, so the man picks him up, kicks him across the floor for no reason, and then puts a gas mask on Rudo's face. At first, Rudo is mad, but then he realizes he can actually breathe now, so we should be grateful. He turns to the man and thanks him for his help, but he has a few questions about this place, like where they are, what those monsters are, and is everywhere else like this as well. All very valid questions, but the mysterious man just tells Rudo to shut his mouth and be quiet. Rudo doesn't understand why the man doesn't want to answer his questions, so he starts yelling that he needs answers. He just got tossed down here and has no idea what this place is, so he refuses to be quiet until the man gives him some answers. All Rudo's yelling pisses the man off, so he starts yelling back at him. He says this place is one of the many toxic dumps that spirits like Rudo created, and he would have explained that eventually, but Rudo couldn't keep his damn mouth shut, so now they've got to deal with those things again. The man explains that those are trash beasts, monsters made of trash, that can't be harmed with normal weapons, and they react to sound, so Rudo's yelling basically sounded the dinner bell for all the trash beasts in the area. The trash beasts in this area are particularly bad, so the man was hoping to avoid drawing their attention, but it's too late for that now. Energy begins to flow from the man's arms into the umbrella he's holding, and right before Rudo's eyes, the umbrella changes its form, so as the trash monster attacks, the man uses the umbrella to shred it to pieces. Rudo is in disbelief at the fact that the man was able to destroy the trash monster so easily, but there are a lot more where that came from, so he's still got a lot of work ahead of him. The man prepares to charge, and within seconds, he's able to take down a dozen or so trash beasts like it's nothing. Rudo is amazed by what he has just witnessed, and he is curious as to why that umbrella is so powerful, because if he was able to do damage like that on his own, he could finally make all those jerks in the city regret what they did. One of the trash monsters begins vomiting up some putrid purple goo, and the man can tell that it's not a good idea to touch it, so he uses his umbrella to parry the spray before driving the umbrella straight through the monster's head. Once the man is done, he goes back over to Rudo to check on him, and he takes off his mask to introduce himself. He says his name is Engine and he is a cleaner. but he immediately regrets taking his mask off because the air still smells awful. Moments later, Rudo passes out from exhaustion because of all the damage he suffered earlier, and while he's unconscious, he recalls an old memory of his time with Recto. When Rudo was younger, he returned home one day covered in mud, so Recto asked him what happened, and he explains that he had been pushed into the dirt by some kids. All he did was tell them that objects are alive because if you take care of them for long enough, a soul will come and live in them. But the kids just laughed and started picking on him after that. Rudo learned that story from Recto, so he feels bad that repeating it got Rudo in trouble, because stories like those are usually just made up. But Recto does believe that objects can have souls. Rudo lights up after hearing this and asks if that means all the stuff in the room has a soul as well, and Recto says anything can have a soul. Even the gloves that Rudo is wearing can have a soul as long as he cherishes them. Rudo later wakes up and finds himself being dragged across the floor by Engine. He starts yelling demands to know why Engine chained him up, so Engine reminds Rudo that he's still a total stranger, and there's no way Engine is bringing a stranger back to base without taking some precautions first. Rudo starts squirming around a lot and tells Engine to let him go because he needs to get back to the city as soon as possible, but Engine tells him that it isn't possible right now. The place Rudo calls the city is called the Sphere down here, and it kind of moves around a lot in the sky, so it's difficult to keep track of where it is. There's also the fact that Rudo isn't able to fly, so he'd never be able to get back up there in the first place. There are other factors as well, but the point here is that for now, Rudo is stuck down here, so he should just stay quiet and deal with it. However, Rudo refuses to give up because nothing's going to stop him from getting revenge on those pricks in the sphere. Earlier, Engine said Rudo was stuck for now, meaning there must be some way to get up to the sphere after all, and Rudo wants to know what that is. He asks Engine to tell him everything there is to know about this place and how to leave, because he's not going to shut up until Engine fills him in. Engine is getting sick of all of Rudo's constant yelling, so he tells him that if he's so desperate to find out what kind of place the surface is, then he's going to get a first-hand lesson. Engine continues driving Rudo until he eventually arrives at an old service station with 2 trucks out front. Engine then drops Rudo off and wishes him luck before leaving him there to fend for himself. Just then, Rudo spots 5 men staring at him, and they all seem astonished by the sight of him. They think the clothes on Rudo's body are strange, so they begin speculating that he might be a spirit, but just to be sure, they ask Rudo where he came from. Rudo tells them that he fell from the place they call the Sphere, and as soon as he says this, all the men take off their masks in surprise because they've never seen a living spherite before. They still find it hard to believe that a spherite managed to survive that kind of fall, but judging by the way Rudo's face looks, he's got to be telling the truth. Rudo doesn't like the fact that a bunch of random men are touching his face, so he pulls away, and the men apologize for being rude, but they don't see people like Rudo often, so they got a little excited. Anyway, the leader can see that Rudo must be uncomfortable in those chains, so he offers to change them for him, and Rudo thinks he is actually pretty nice, but unfortunately, things didn't end the way Rudo thought they would. He ends up chained up in the back of their truck instead, and the men start joking about how dumb it was for Rudo to trust them when he has no idea who they are. As the chains are tightened, the leader reminds the others to be careful with him because they wouldn't want to damage their latest product. Spheroids fetch a high price around here, but it's mostly just spherite bodies that are sold. Eyes, fingers, and even spherite clothes go for a high price, but the leader never could have imagined that he would find a living spherite. He'd assure that Rudo must be wondering why people are willing to pay so much for spherits, so he tells him that it's because all the people on the surface despise the spheraites. All they ever do is dump their trash on the people here. And it just keeps building and building until it turns the air into poison. It even creates monsters down here, so the spherits are practically slaughtering the surface dwellers with all the trash they dump down here. So once the people here find out that Rudo is one of the spherits, it's not going to be good for him. He may get tortured, torn apart, or maybe someone will even bust out the baby oil, but the leader doesn't care what happens to Rudo either way because he's going to make a lot of money selling him to the highest bidder. But before that, he wants to get a little payback of his own, so he starts shoving trash down Rudo's mouth. He thinks Rudo must have been living a sheltered life up in the sphere, so being forced to eat trash like this should break his spirit. But while he is shoving a piece of trash down Rudo's throat, Rudo bites down on his fingers and rips the flesh right off the bone. The leader jumps back in pain, but Rudo keeps chewing the flesh and even swallows. Back in the slums, Rudo was forced to eat trash like this all the time, so nothing has changed for him. Even the discrimination is the same here because no matter where Rudo goes, people will always look for a reason to treat him like garbage, and he's sick of it. He rips himself out of the chains, and right now, Rudo has lost all sense of reason, so the only thing in his mind is murder. Engine has been watching the whole thing unfold from a cliff nearby, and he is impressed by what he sees Rudo is capable of. Rudo recalls what Recto told him about how taking care of something long enough will grant it a soul, but as Rudo grabs the chain floating in front of him, it begins to glow red, shocking the scavengers. On the surface, there are special people like Engine who are able to give life to objects to draw out their full power, and Rudo is one of them. The chain he was holding transforms, so the other scavengers are cautious about attacking him. But the leader reminds them that even if Rudo is a giver, as long as they get that chain away from him, he won't be able to use his powers anymore. The scavengers manage to knock the chain out of Rudo's hand, but that doesn't stop him because Rudo just grabs a nearby tire instead and uses it to beat the crap out of all of them. The last one left is the leader, and there's nothing he can do to stop Rudo, so he resorts to insulting him over and over again. But that just makes him even angrier, so Rudo is about to end him on the spot, but at the last second, Engine comes down and stops him. Rudo finally snaps out of it, and the tire he was using crumbles to dust moments later. Rudo has no idea what just happened or how he did all that, but he has a feeling that it has something to do with his gloves. Engine apologizes for ditching Rudo here, but he had to see what Rudo is capable of, and now that he knows Rudo is a giver, he wants to offer him a deal. He will tell Rudo anything he wants to know, and in exchange, Rudo will have to come work with him and the rest of the cleaners. But after everything that has happened, Rudo is done trusting people, so he tells Engine nope. Anyway, Engine kidnaps Rudo. It was pretty easy considering how badly Rudo was hurt, so he took him to a doctor to have him patched up. While he's there, Engine informs one of his teammates that he has found a talented kid to join their team. Rudo yells that he never agreed to join Engine's team, but Engine tells him he doesn't really have a choice because he's definitely going to die out there without any help. The doctor starts yelling at Rudo as well and tells him it was beyond stupid to head into no man's land on his own. In fact, with all that toxic air that he inhaled, the doctor is surprised Rudo's even alive. He'd better be grateful Engine saved his dumb butt. Just looking at Rudo's face is starting to piss the doctor off, so he tells him to pay up and get out already. After that, Engine pays the doctor, and the two of them leave the office together. Rudo is genuinely grateful that Engine is helping him out so much, but he is serious about not being able to join Engine's team. He has to get back up to the sphere to get his revenge, so he doesn't have time to sit around here and collect trash, or whatever it is that Engine's team does. Engine tells Rudo that he's free to go asking around for information on how to get back up to the sphere, but there are two things he should know first. One, literally everyone here hates spherites just as much as those body sellers do, so if anyone finds out that Rudo is one of them, he's toast. And two, this isn't the kind of place where you can get information for free, so asking around won't do much good for Rudo. Inside one of the trash cities, Engine buys Rudo some real food while they sit at a nearby table, and Rudo is loving the burger. He is a little surprised since he always imagined the pit being nothing but trash. However, now that he has seen it for himself, this place just looks like a regular city with trash everywhere. Engine decides to give Rudo a little info about this place, so he starts explaining how trash can often come with a mix of emotional power called anama. This anama sometimes gathers into one large mass, which in turn gives rise to the trash beasts Rudo had to deal with. Trash beasts attack humans on sight, but they tend to stick around the dumping sites, so the people in the city don't have to deal with them often. But there is the occasional incident where a trash beast terrorizes a city. Furthermore, it's not easy to take out trash beasts, you need to destroy their cores, and that can only be done using special equipment like Engine's umbrella or Rudo's gloves. It may seem like ordinary stuff, but given enough time and care, Anama will inhabit any object, making it an effective weapon against trash beasts. However, there are only a few people who are capable of drawing out the Anama in these vital instruments, givers, and Rudo just so happens to be one of them. Engine tells Rudo that he is a cleaner who works for an organization of trash beast exterminators, and they need all the givers they can get, so he wants Rudo to come work with him. Rudo asks if he's really going to tell him how to get back to the sphere if he works with him, but about that, Engine has no idea how to get to the sphere. He just lied earlier to make sure Rudo would pay attention to his pitch. Rudo is understandably pissed that Engine lied to him, but Engine says his boss is a lot more up to date on the things that happen here, so he probably know of a way for Rudo to return to the sphere. Rudo is frustrated that he now has to meet Engine's boss just to maybe have a shot at getting back up to the sphere. A few moments later, Engine gets a call, so he needs to go take care of some business real quick. But before he goes, he gives Rudo a bag of money and tells him he can do whatever he wants with it in the meantime. Rudo is shocked by Engine's generosity and asks him if it's really alright for him to take this, but Engine has no problem with it, especially since that's the money he earned by selling Rudo's spheric clothes. Rudo hadn't really thought about it before now, but his clothes are actually missing, and he's angry that Engine would sell them without his permission. But in Engine's defense, wearing spheric clothes around here would only draw unwanted attention, so he was actually doing Rudo a favor. Anyway, he walks off before Rudo gets a chance to yell at him, but while Rudo wasn't paying attention, a cat jumps down from one of the signboards and it snatches the money on the table before running away. Rudo isn't about to let himself get robbed by a cat, so he starts chasing it down the alley it ran into. The cat is really fast, so Rudo won't be able to catch it with his bare hands at this rate. To make things easier for himself, Rudo grabs a nearby stick to catch the cat, and while it does help him pin it to the ground, he failed to realize that the stick actually belongs to someone, and that someone is not happy. He accuses Rudo of robbing him, but Rudo has no idea what the guy is talking about since he doesn't remember stealing anything from him. Zanka tells Rudo that he's talking about the stick in his hand, but Rudo has no idea that a regular old stick could be so important to someone. Zanka grabs the stick out of Rudo's hands and tells him that it's not just an ordinary stick, and it's not something that you can steal without facing severe consequences, so Zanka activates the vital instrument and says he's going to teach Rudo a lesson in respect. He slams his stick into the ground in front of Rudo, and he warns him that even if he is a prodigy, he has no right to touch another man's stick. Rudo asks how Zanka knows about him, so Zanka explains that he's one of the cleaners, and Engine already told him all about Rudo and asked Zanka to teach him a few things. Engine seemed to have high hopes for Rudo, but Rudo is a long way away from living up to his potential, especially if he has to teach Rudo something as basic as don't steal from other people. Rudo tries telling him that he wasn't stealing the stick, he just needed to use it to catch the cat that stole his money, but Zanka isn't interested in listening to his excuses. He tells Rudo he must have had a terrible father if he thinks it's alright to take other people's property, but insulting Recto is crossing the line, so Rudo's eyes light up in rage. Just then, Rudo has a flashback to one of the life lessons he learned from Recto, and told him that people can't come to an understanding when you come at them angry, so sometimes cooling off a little and trying to understand things from their perspective can help settle things peacefully. Rudo decides to put that lesson into practice here, so he thinks about how things must look from Zanka's perspective. He is angry because he thinks Rudo tried to steal his precious stick, and Rudo can relate because he'd be just as mad if someone tried to steal his gloves from him, so he apologizes to Zanka for what he did. It turns out that the apology was super effective because Zanka deactivates his stick and tells Rudo he's willing to let it go. He also apologizes for threatening Rudo earlier, since even if he was upset, as Rudo's teacher, he should have tried to remain calm. Rudo is astonished by how easy it was to defuse the situation once he apologized, and Zanka seems like a whole new person now that he's not angry anymore. Zanka extends his hand to help Rudo up and asks him what his vital instrument is, so Rudo tells him that he's pretty sure it's his gloves, but he doesn't know how to activate them at will yet. Zanka starts giving Rudo a little explanation on how vital instruments work, but Rudo isn't paying attention because he's so focused on how different Zanka looks now that he's smiling. He wonders if this is what Recto was talking about when he said you look better with a smile on your face, and he wants to try it for himself. He's been practicing for a while, so he should be able to smile properly by now. Never mind, it's even worse than it was before. Zanka has no idea what he's looking at, but that definitely doesn't look like a smile, so he gets mad because he thinks Rudo is mocking him even though he was trying really hard to be nice. Rudo tries to explain that he really is just trying to smile, but it's really hard to believe him when his face looks like that. On top of that, Zanka really doesn't like Rudo's attitude regarding the work the cleaners do because they are out here every day, risking their lives to save others, but Rudo is probably just doing this for some stupid reason. Rudo has flashbacks to the final words Recto ever said to him about how he should change the world, and he is enraged that Zanka would call his goal stupid when he's trying to honor Recto's final wish. Zanka says he was really trying to keep an open mind about Rudo, but he just can't bring himself to get along with him. So he's done being nice. Rudo is also fed up with being polite, so he grabs something out of the trash and says he's going to beat the crap out of Zanka. Zanka is shocked to see Rudo using something other than his gloves as a vital instrument, and he finally understands what Engine meant when he said Rudo was a prodigy. But while he's willing to admit that it's impressive, raw talent like Rudo's means nothing unless you've got the skills to back it up. Just then, Rudo realizes that Zanka isn't holding his stick anymore, and when he looks up, he sees it hurtling straight towards him. He manages to dodge it, but Zanka runs up and starts putting a lot of pressure on him. Rudo eventually finds an opening to counterattack, but he is only able to graze Zanka's cheek. Zanka then slams Rudo into the ground and calls him a pathetic excuse for a giver, but then he notices something on his cheek, and to his horror, after taking a sniff, he finds out that it's poop. He then looks over to Rudo, and he realizes the weapon he picked out of the trash was a plunger, and a filthy one at that. Rudo has no idea what Zanka is so freaked out about since he has never seen a plunger before, but he doesn't intend to stop fighting, so even though Zanka is begging for a timeout, Rudo keeps chasing after him. Rudo assumes that whatever this plunger thing is must be really dangerous, so he proudly jumps into the air and swings at Zanka, splattering Doki all over the place. A little while later, Engine returns to check on Rudo, but when he finally finds him, he sees Rudo standing over an unconscious Zanka, covered in poop. They both get into the car, and after explaining the whole story, Engine starts laughing hysterically because he never would have expected that Rudo and Zanka's first meeting would end up with Rudo flinging poop at him. Zanka is pretty much the closest you can get to a spoiled rich kid on the surface, so getting covered in poop was extremely humiliating for him. And Rudo had no idea that he was flinging crap the entire time, so he's ashamed of himself because that's disgusting even for him. Anyway, Engine thinks this was a good bonding opportunity for the two of them, and he assures Rudo that Zanka is the best there is when it comes to controlling vital instruments, so he's going to be a great teacher for him. Zanka feels honored that his idol, the famous Engine, thinks so highly of him. But while he's basking in the recognition, Rudo notices a pair of boots sticking out of the trunk, and Engine tells him that's just Rio. He asks her what she's doing here, so she explains that she just wanted to see the new guy in person. Rudo is a little nervous since he still has almost zero experience talking to girls, but then Rio starts fiddling with his hair because she thinks the color is cool, and even Chua never got handsy with Rudo like this, so he doesn't know how to react and freezes up. And while that's going on in the back seat, Engine says they are heading straight for the cleaner's headquarters. Once they arrive, Rio says goodbye to Rudo, and Engine takes him to meet the receptionist, Semiyu. She has already heard all about Rudo, so she has a good idea of where he came from and what his potential is, but she'd still like to see it for herself. Rudo doesn't understand what she's talking about, so Engine explains that Semiyu's glasses are her vital instrument and they boost her kinetic vision, allowing her to see all kinds of things about a person. Semiyu activates her glasses and takes a look at Rudo, but her vision is suddenly blocked out by a black haze when she tries to look closer, so she gets startled. Engine asks her if something is wrong, but she brushes it off and tells him that Rudo is in good physical shape and he has a good relationship with his vital instrument, but not much skill when it comes to using it, so it's going to take a lot of training before he will be able to activate it on command. Engine is still a little concerned about the way she reacted earlier, so he asks her if she's sure there's nothing wrong, but Semiyu doesn't want to talk about it, so she changes topics and points out that there's poop on the back of Rudo's neck. Engine bursts out in laughter because he still can't get over how funny Rudo was earlier, and since Semiyu is done with her inspection, Engine says he's going to take Rudo to meet their boss. Along the way, he decides to give Rudo a rundown of how the Cleaners organization works. Including all the combatants, sentinels, and supporters, there are around 100 Cleaners in total, but with how busy it gets around here, it's rare for all of them to be in the building at the same time. On that note, he asks Rudo if he's ready to meet some of his new coworkers. Rudo asks if this is really a good time for introductions, but Engine tells him it won't take long since he assumes most of the other cleaners will be out on missions. However, he couldn't have been more wrong. Nearly every cleaner in the organization was just hanging out in the break room. He realizes it would take too long to introduce them to Rudo right now, so he says he'll just do that later. After that, he takes Rudo straight to the boss's room, but before Rudo goes in, he wants to make sure he knows he can't just start demanding info out of nowhere. Information is a hot commodity, and it doesn't come cheap, so if Rudo wants to learn anything, he's going to have to tell the boss that he's willing to work for it. Also, as a quick word of advice, he warns Rudo not to ask about the boss's vital instrument because he doesn't like talking about it. And if he's thinking about asking the others here about it, there's no point because none of them know what the boss's vital instrument does either, and frankly, they don't care because they trust the boss more than anyone else. After hearing how much the boss is respected, Rudo wants to make a good first impression, so he opens the door to introduce himself, but to his surprise, the office is empty. Just then, Semiyu walks up behind them and she totally forgot to mention that the boss is out on some business, so he won't be around for a while. Engine had no idea, so he apologizes to Rudo and asks Semiyu if she knows when the boss will be back. But she's got no clue where the boss even went to begin with, so it looks like Rudo's just going to have to sit and wait until the boss gets back. Just then, Rio shows up and she tells Rudo that if he's got nothing better to do, he's free to come watch her work if he wants, and it'd be a great opportunity for the two of them to get to know each other better. Rudo agrees to go with her, so Semiyu gives a breakdown of the mission Rio will be going on. One of the towns near a polluted zone is worried because trash beasts have been approaching its gate recently, and they don't want to take any chances, so they ask the cleaners to come help. It seems simple so far, but Rudo hasn't been following a single word Semiyu just said, so she asks Engine if he actually explained anything to Rudo or not. Engine admits that he may have skipped over a few important details here and there, so Semiyu is going to have to give him a crash course to get him up to speed. Basically, on the ground, there are two different types of land. There are the habitable areas known as safe zones, and then there's the trash-ridden wastelands known as polluted zones. And while all polluted zones are dangerous, there are some that are particularly deadly, and these areas are called no man's land. The trash beasts here are so powerful and violent that pretty much any human who wanders in there ends up dead, and to be honest, it's nothing short of a miracle that Engine found Rudo when he did, because he definitely would have died if he was left on his own. But speaking of which, Semiyu asks Engine what he was doing all the way out in a no man's land by himself, but Engine doesn't want to explain himself, so she just moves on. One thing she wants Rudo to take note of, though, is the fact that whenever he's in a polluted zone, he needs to make sure he's wearing a gas mask because breathing that toxic air in for too long can make you seriously ill. A little while later, Rudo arrives at the job site with Rio and her team, and even though he can't technically become part of the cleaners until their boss gets back and approves him, she wants him to stay close and pay as much attention as possible. Rudo looks out into the distance, and beyond the city wall, he can see an empty wasteland which must be where the polluted lands start. It makes him wonder just how long he was breathing in the toxic air when he first got here, but now that he has seen the cities down here, he is amazed how different everything is from his expectations. Back when Rudo was in the sphere, he always just thought people who were dropped into the hole would just immediately die, and he had no idea that there were actually people down here. For a moment, he wonders if the other spirits are aware of the people down here, but even if they were, they'd probably continue dumping their trash down here anyway. Once he catches up with Rio, he asks her who the other guys here are, so she explains that they are cleaners here to the mission. but they don't have any power, so they mostly handle support. One of the supporters turns around and introduces himself, but when they shake hands, the guy accidentally squeezes way too hard. Ryo laughs and tells Rudo the guy is known for his physical strength because he is able to crack trash beasts open with a single punch, even if they can't kill them. Rudo is amazed that everyone here is on such a different level, so he plans to watch and learn as much as he can, even though this is meant to be an easy job. Just then, trash beasts begin to emerge from the polluted lands, so Ryo tells Rudo to stand back and watch, but then Rudo sees just how many trash beasts there are, and he's starting to freak out because he wasn't expecting to see so many at once. Ryo tells him to calm down since these are just regular trash beasts and they are pretty weak, so they won't be able to put a dent in the fence. Ryo was right about them not being able to put a dent in the wall, but then even more trash beasts show up, and these ones look like the kind that'd be able to break the fence. Rudo sees the fence start to budge, so he panics and asks Ryo what they are going to do, but Ryo tells him everything is still under control. These ones are just slightly bigger versions of the ones from before, and if they play their cards right, they might be able to finish up here early, and then she'd be able to throw a welcome party for Rudo. Rudo asks her how she could be thinking of a party at a time like this, so Ryo tells him that if he's going to survive on the ground, and he's going to need to learn the importance of keeping a cool head in dangerous situations. Rudo realizes she's right, so he decides to try remaining calm no matter what as well. But then a giant trash beast makes an appearance, and it's really hard for Rudo to stay calm in the face of that thing. Ryo can't believe what she's seeing since this is the first time she's ever encountered a trash beast like this before, so she takes out her vital instrument and she's about to get started. But before she deals with the big guy, she wants to thin out the herd on the ground, so she jumps into the air and activates her scissors before beheading several trash beasts in one go. Rudo is mesmerized by how skilled Ryo is with her vital instrument, but the supporters remind him that even if he's just here to observe, he still needs to be aware of his surroundings so he can protect himself. One of the trash beasts had managed to slip behind him while he wasn't looking, and it is about to ram right into him. But at the last second, the supporter steps in and stops it with one hand. He then crushes the beast's skull and throws it over to Ryo, so she gets her scissors ready and splits it in half when it lands. She asks the supporters to keep it coming, so they get to work crushing trash beasts and then tossing them towards Ryo. Trash beasts can't be truly killed without the use of a vital instrument, but the supporters are still able to crush or disable them to make it easier for Ryo to finish them off. Once most of the smaller ones have been taken out, Ryo decides to go after the big one, and while she's doing that, the supporters go around making sure all the small trash beasts that are left stay out of her way. However, one of the supporters gets caught off guard when a trash beast springs back to life all of a sudden. He is about to be crushed by it, but at the last second, Rudo steps in to protect him. After seeing how well everyone works together, he realizes that he's going to need to pull his weight around here if he's going to be part of the team, and that means he needs to have them covered. As Rudo says this, his powers begin reacting with a rod in his hand, turning it into a protective cage, but Rudo has no idea what triggered his power this time because so far it has only activated when he's angry, and he wasn't angry at anyone. The cage begins to crumble soon after, but it bought Rudo enough time for Ryo to show up, and as soon as she gets there, she destroys the trash beast. They're all really grateful that Rudo stepped in to save him, but they still got to deal with the big one. Ryo tried cutting it in half earlier, but for some reason the beast was able to just piece itself back together. It's annoying, but Ryo's just going to have to keep dicing it up until it stops moving eventually. And since it's a new type of beast, they aren't sure what it can do, so a few supporters go to warn the surrounding cities about it, while Ryo jumps in to engage. She stabs into the monster's face, and then goes after the tendrils on top of its head. After cutting them all off, she finds a glowing spot on the back of the monster's head, and it looks like it's pretty important, so she thinks she's just found the monster's weak spot. The beast starts reacting violently, which means Ryo must have been right, so she jumps into the air and slams her scissors right through the monster's head, piercing whatever was powering it and turning it to dust. However, when the supporters ask her what she did to defeat the beast, she tells them that the monster died when she pushed this thing out of its head, so it must have been its power source. But she's kind of hoping she's wrong about it because the thing in her hand is a vital instrument, and if trash beasts are able to fuse with vital instruments now, they have a major problem on their hands. Elsewhere, the man who tried to kidnap Rudo wakes up in a pile of trash, and he is really confused because the last thing he remembers was getting his ass kicked by a spheric kid, so he has no idea how he ended up here. Just then, he looks forward and notices a man sitting on the couch in front of him, and the man tells him he wants to hear all about the spheric kid that beat him up. Later that night, Zanka gets up from bed and hears a lot of people talking in the cafeteria, so he goes to check it out, and he is surprised to see everyone in the middle of a huge party. He finds Ryo and asks her what all this is for, so she tells him this is Rudo's big welcome party, but Zanka doesn't buy it since Rudo hasn't done anything to earn a party this big. He bets Ryo and the others just wanted an excuse to get drunk. And he's not wrong, that's kind of the whole point of parties in the first place. Since this is meant to be Rudo's party, Zanka thinks it's weird that he hasn't seen him around yet, so he looks around and eventually spots Rudo looking sad with his head down on a table. He asks Ryo what's up with him, But she's not exactly sure. He's just been really upset since they got back from the mission, so she wanted to give him some space to figure himself out. Speaking of the mission, Zanka asks her how it went. He heard rumors that she went up against some kind of weird trash beast. However, Rio says weird is an understatement because that trash beast's core wasn't made of anama, it was a vital instrument. She's still hoping she's wrong about it because just thinking about the implications of trash beasts with vital instruments gives her a headache. So she decided not to think about it at all and just enjoy the party. While those two are talking, Chris pulls up a chair at Rudo's table and because he wants to have a little chat with him. He asks Rudo why he's so down when he did good works yesterday, but Rudo says he didn't actually do anything helpful. Grizz reminds him that he saved Folo, the Goggles kid, from getting trampled by the trash beast, but even then he doesn't think he made much of a difference. Rio and Grizz were the ones saving people out there, but Rudo, on the other hand, rushed in without thinking and nearly made things worse. It was the same way when he was back up in the sphere, because all it took was one stupid insult and he'd fly off the rails in rage. Then Recto would always have to apologize on his behalf. His job yesterday was to just stay back and observe, but he ended up just putting himself in danger like a fool. Even so, Grizz still wants to thank Rudo for what he did to save Folo. Supporters are usually looked down on as dead weight, and there are even some cleaners who treat them like they are worthless. But Rudo showed them respect from the start, and Grizz appreciates that. Folo, for instance, really wanted to become a cleaner and help fight the trash beasts, but to do that you need power, so he began working on a treasured object hoping to become a giver. However, as time went on, Folo slowly realized that whether he had a vital instrument or not, he still wanted to help people, so he became a supporter instead because every job is important. Grizz asks Rudo if he knows what he really wants, specifically something aside from his goal of getting revenge, but Rudo doesn't know how to answer that. Grizz tells him it's fine if he can't answer right away since it's a loaded question, but eventually he's sure Rudo will figure it out because he's still got a long life to live. Grizz's speech really struck a chord with Rudo, so he's feeling a lot better now, and he decided to go join the others at the party. But elsewhere, the scrap collector who got kidnapped isn't having such a great time. The guy who kidnapped him, Jabber, just spent the last few hours torturing him for info on Rudo. And what makes it worse is the fact that the scrap collector already told him everything he knows about the boy, which isn't a lot considering he has only ever seen him once, but Jabber still tortured him just for the love of the game. He is now a bloody mess and begs Jabber to just let him go already, but instead he decides to slice his face off to put an end to his misery because he's bored. Jabber couldn't get much information out of his victim, but he did find out what Rudo looks like and the fact that he is both a spirit and a giver, so he will make an excellent addition to Jabber's collection. Later that day, back at Cleaner's HQ, Semia receives a call at the front desk, and it's a particularly interesting case, so she calls the team in to give the details. She apologizes for how sudden this is, but Zanka doesn't mind the early job. However, something he does mind is the fact that she expects him to bring Rudo along for this mission. He knows he's meant to be Rudo's trainer, but that only takes effect once he becomes an official cleaner, and the boss isn't going to be back anytime soon, so that's going to take a while. Semiyu tells him she has every right to call in whoever she wants for the mission, and besides, Rudo is relevant here, so she figured sending him out would be a good idea. The job came from a merchant who reportedly got his valuable merchandise snatched by a trash beast while he was traveling through a polluted zone, and apparently, his merchandise is a living, breathing spherite. Everyone is shocked to hear that because spherites like Rudo surviving the fall is rare enough as it is, but what are the chances of two spherites surviving in such a short time frame? That's why she figured Rudo would be interested in going on this mission, and if he's lucky, the spherite might have some insight on how to get back up there. Rudian is sure Rudo must have a lot to think about right now, so he tells him there's no pressure if he doesn't want to go because at the end of the day, it's his choice to make. Rudo takes a moment to look at himself and he knows he still can't use his powers properly, so if he goes, he's probably going to end up holding everyone back. But at the same time, this would be a good opportunity for him to learn more about his abilities, so he ultimately decides to join them after all. Zanka doesn't seem thrilled about the idea of having to go on a mission with Rudo, so to convince him, Semiyu starts talking about how she was originally going to send Engine out on this mission, but something came up, so Engine personally recommended Zanka for the job. Hearing that his idol is the one who recommended him gets Zanka all hyped up, so he agrees to go on the mission without a second thought, and the others followed his lead. While they are walking, Rudo asks Gris if he's sure he's alright out here without a weapon, but he says basic trash beasts usually go down after a good punch or two, so he should be alright. Folo joins in on the conversation and tells Rudo that Gris is just acting tough, because deep down he's always worried when they go on missions. So much so that he carries a lucky charm with him everywhere in hopes that it would keep them safe. Just then, the group is interrupted by a woman named Grim, and now that everyone is here, she asks if they can finally get going because she still needs to show them where the trash beast went. Rudo realizes that she must be the client who hired them, so he starts asking her a bunch of questions about the spherite that she found, what they looked like, and where they were when she found them. Grim explains that she just happened to stumble across the spherite while traveling, and the poor thing was unconscious the entire time, so she hasn't gotten a chance to talk to them yet. She says she really hopes they can find the spirit before they get hurt, and Rudo assumes she must only be worried because she wants to sell the spirit's body parts for money. However, Grimm says she is genuinely concerned about the spirit's safety. She'll admit that she has her curiosities, but she'd never consider harming them for personal profit. Rudo still doesn't trust her, but finding the spirit takes top priority, so they all get moving. But no matter how you look at it, any regular human who gets snatched up by a trash beast is almost certainly a goner, so Zanka doubts they are going to find the spirit in one piece. In fact, he has been getting a bad feeling about this whole operation ever since Grimm arrived, but he's not sure why. They eventually arrive at an old abandoned building, and Grimm tells them that's the place where the spirit got snatched, so they all prepare themselves and head in to fight. However, instead of a trash beast, they find the place completely empty aside from a doll sitting on the chair over there. And all of a sudden, Grimm becomes very aggressive and shoves everyone into the middle of the room. Moments later, the floor collapses beneath their feet, sending them all falling into the basement. They all manage to survive somehow, so Gris yells at Grimm and asks her what she thinks she's doing. She tells them she's just making it easier to get to the spirit, and when she says spirit, she's referring to Rudo. Grimm then melts down into a pile of mud, and down in the tunnel, two shady figures emerge from the darkness holding purple lanterns. Zanka had his suspicions before coming here, and he is really wishing he had trusted his gut because it's clear that they have fallen into a raider trap. Rudo asks what Zanka means by raiders, so Gris explains that these guys are basically bandits, but their activities have become rather extreme lately, even sometimes going as far as to experiment on people. Normally, they wouldn't be such a big deal, but most of them are givers, so they pose a significant threat. They don't have much time, so Briz asks the other three supporters to go look for an exit route while he and Folo protect Rudo. He warns everyone that there could be other raiders out here, so they need to be careful, and in the meantime, he's going to have to ask Zanka to take care of the two raiders in front of them. Zanka tells them he's got things covered over here, so they should get moving already, and after a moment of hesitation, Rudo follows Grizz and Folo to look for an exit. He tells Grizz he could have stayed and fought alongside Zanka, and Grizz understands that Rudo wants to help, but raiders aren't your run-of-the-mill goons. And it'd be way too risky to stick around with Rudo here, making Rudo feel like he's being a burden once again. Meanwhile, Zanka asks the raiders how they managed to find Rudo so quickly. He kind of figured that it'd only be a matter of time before people caught wind of Rudo's existence and came after him. But he has literally only been here for 2 days. He assumes the raiders must be in it for the money they'd make from selling him, but Grimm tells him she would never dream of selling Rudo. Not when she can get so much valuable information from studying his brain. Zanka personally doesn't care about why she wants to take Rudo, but he hates the fact that she wasted his time with this whole fake request. Grimm tells him he can take out his frustration on her puppet if he'd like, and within seconds, Zanka is surrounded on all sides by mud figures, but he isn't really worried because destroying a couple of mud puppets will be easy. He begins bashing the mud puppets in, but Grimm looks like she has a trick up her sleeve, and before he realizes what's going on, Konzo emerges from one of the puppets and clocks Zanka in the face. Grimm's mud puppets may not pack much of a punch, but with Konzo mixed in with them, he will never know where the next punch is going to come from, and eventually they'll be able to wear him out. And to make matters worse, the mud Grimm makes has been spraying all over the place every time Zanka destroys a puppet, so it is becoming difficult for him to walk. Grimm tells him that as much as she has been enjoying their fight, she needs to put him down before she goes after Rudo, because Zanka's abilities are rather troublesome, but Zanka cuts her off mid-sentence because he's tired of her yapping. He'll admit that she had him in the first half, but watching how she fights made him realize a few things. Grimm clearly uses her shovel to control the mud, and at first, Zanka was worried that Konzo might have a vital instrument as well, but it looks like the only thing he's good for is punching and kicking. In fact, the only reason he's able to move around in the mud so well is because he put on a pair of snowshoes before the fight began to distribute his weight evenly, and he thinks it's cute that the two of them thought this would be enough to defeat him. Grimm is getting angry, so she sends all her mud puppets to attack Zanka at once, but before they get close to him, he jams his stick into the ground and uses it as a tuning fork to feel the vibrations in the environment. He is now able to detect even the slightest anomalies within the mud puppets, and it only takes him a few seconds to locate the one that has Konzo hiding inside. Zanka then makes a beeline for that puppet and whacks Konzo across the face. He then does the same to Grimm, knocking both of them out instantly. With Grimm unconscious, all the mud puppets begin to disintegrate, and Zanka is almost disappointed with how easy that was, but all of a sudden, he hears the voice of Jabber standing right behind him, and he can already tell that he's in deep trouble. Meanwhile, Rudo and the others are still on the run when they come across an exit, so they have a secured means of escape now, but the signal down here is terrible, meaning they won't be able to radio into HQ. Grizz sends the others out first so they can go call for backup, while he, Folo, and Rudo are going to hang back since they still have to wait for Zanka. A few moments later, they hear footsteps heading their way, and at first Rudo thinks Zanka must have finally caught up to them, but then he takes a closer look and realizes it's a completely different guy. Jabber takes one look at Rudo, and his messy white hair fits the description he got, so once he confirms that Rudo is the spirit giver he heard about, he immediately jumps up against the wall behind them and destroys the exit to prevent him from escaping. Grizz and Folo really didn't want to have to deal with another raider, but they warn him that Rudo is one of them, so if he wants to take him, he's going to have to get through them first. However, Jabber isn't really paying attention to them because he's pissed about how much time he wasted getting here. He would have found them sooner, but he got lost along the way, so that's his fault. Just then, Grizz realizes that he hasn't seen Zenka in a while, so he asks what Jabber did to him. But again, he totally ignores Grizz and walks up to Rudo, telling him that there's someone who wants to have a nice chat with Rudo, so they'd appreciate it if he came quietly. He pulls himself away from Jabber and demands to know where Zenka is, and Jabber has no idea who this Zenka person is supposed to be, but he does recall fighting someone with a bad attitude back there, so if that's who Rudo is worried about, then he tells him Zenka is fine. Zenka was pretty strong, and Jabber likes people who have the bite to go along with the bark, so he made sure to go easy on him. But with that said, he's sure Zenka is in a ton of pain right now since the venom he uses is not fun to deal with, but if Rudo agrees to come along peacefully, he promises to make sure it won't hurt at all. In the next moment, Grizz and Folo try to knock Jabber out while he's distracted, but he's too quick for them, so he ducks underneath and kicks them aside. As Jabber said earlier, he respects people who are strong, so he's impressed with the power behind Grizz's swing, but then he realizes that Grizz is just a supporter, and all his interest vanishes in an instant. Rudo pleads with Grizz to stay back since he might get himself hurt going up against a giver on his own, but Jabber tells him it's a little too late for that since while Rudo was talking, he already drove his claws through Grizz's chest. And Jabber really doesn't care since to him, anyone who isn't a giver is weak, and the weak are absolutely worthless. Rudo goes into shock at the sight of Grizz being impaled because it reminds him of what happened to Recto and how powerless he was to stop it. He instinctively reaches out for Grizz's good luck charm that was ripped from his body, and as he grabs hold of it, he has a flashback. One day back when Rudo was younger, Recto came home to find him banging his head against the wall for no reason. He rushed over to stop Rudo and asks him why he was trying to crack his head open. So Rudo says he was just trying to follow Recto's instructions to not hurt other people. Recto did tell him he shouldn't hurt others, but he didn't mean Rudo should hurt himself instead. He blames himself for not being clearer with his instructions because Rudo is clearly going through a lot, so he sits down and asks Rudo to tell him if there's anything wrong. Rudo stares at the ceiling and tells him there's nothing wrong, if that's the problem. He feels totally empty inside, like a black void with nothing but random angry feelings floating about in his head. After Rudo was abandoned, he was treated like absolute garbage up until the point Recto took him in. So Recto assumes he must have internalized his negative feelings over the years until they turned into rage, and now he doesn't know how to address it properly. He apologizes to Rudo since what he's experiencing must be really difficult, but he thinks he has the perfect solution for this. They just need to find something that Rudo is interested in so he can express himself properly, and Recto promises to help him look for as long as it takes. The two head out, and they spend the day walking around while Recto tries to introduce Rudo to some new hobbies. He takes him to a library, tries playing soccer, and even attempts to get Rudo into cooking, but none of it really stands out to him. They weren't able to find anything that Rudo was particularly interested in. But this was only the first day, so Recto is sure they'll find something eventually. Just then, Rudo notices someone on the other side of the fence dumping a bag into a trash chute, so he asks Recto what that guy is doing. Recto responds, telling him that he's probably just throwing trash out, but as soon as Rudo hears that, he becomes hysterical and runs through the gate. Recto chases after him, and when he catches up to Rudo, he tells him he can't just go running off like that. But then he sees Rudo break down into tears while holding an old mask. He asks Rudo if he can explain what he's feeling right now, so Rudo tells him that it's not fair to throw out something that's still good. It may be a little broken, but it can be fixed, and if someone had just cared enough to treat it right, it would have been fine. At first, Recto thought Rudo was just projecting his abandonment issues, but now he realizes that it's more than that. Rudo genuinely sees the worth in everything, even when it has been abandoned, and that's what makes him special. Back to the present, Rudo picks up Grizz's lucky charm, and his powers immediately activate in full force. Grizz, who is still clinging to life, watches from the ground, and he finally understands why Rudo has been struggling to use his ability till now. They were completely wrong about what his power is capable of because Rudo's ability revolves around how much he cares, so he's not simply turning objects into vital instruments, he's seeing the object's true worth and drawing out its power. Jabber is practically drooling over how cool Rudo's power is, and he's dying to know what it can do, so he can't wait to get started. Meanwhile, Folo moves Grizz out of the danger zone and gets ready to administer first aid to him. Rudo looks over at Grizz, and he recalls the conversation he had with him back at HQ about Rudo's personal goals. With everything that happened, he had forgotten to pay attention to the worth of each individual item. And if it weren't for Grizz, he would be blindly throwing his rage around. But now he's going to channel that rage and use it to wipe the stupid grin off Jabber's face and make him regret ever hurting Grizz. Jabber can see that Rudo was seriously pissed, and he's totally excited because there are two things he loves in this world: hard fighters and strong givers, and Rudo looks like he fits both criteria. Jabber charges in like a maniac, and while that's going on, Folo does his best to patch Gris up, but with the extent of the wound, there's no way he's going to be able to stop the bleeding, so it's not looking good for Gris, but he tells Folo not to worry about him too much. As for how things are going with Rudo and Jabber, Jabber has been attacking Rudo for a while now, but he hasn't landed a single hit yet since Rudo keeps dodging, and it's starting to get on his nerves because this hardly counts as a fight. Rudo tells him if he wants some, he can come get it, and Jabber takes that as a personal challenge. He lunges at Rudo once more, but yet again, his slash hits nothing but air. He tells Rudo the fight is going to be boring if all he does is keep dodging, but as it turns out, Rudo is doing a lot more than simple evasion. Because when Jabber attacks again, a slash which should have easily connected misses its target, even though Rudo was standing perfectly still the entire time. No matter what he does, he continues to fail to land a hit, and he soon realizes it must be because of Rudo's vital instrument. This was Gris's talisman, and he'd always carry it around to pray for everyone's safe return. To Rudo, a safe return means coming back uninjured, so to pull that off, you need the best possible defense, so that's what the talisman provides. Jabber finally understands what's going on, but even if Rudo is able to dodge all his attacks on the flip side, Jabber assumes Rudo won't be able to hit him either. However, he couldn't be more wrong about that. This entire time, Jabber hasn't so much as touched Rudo, but Rudo's feet haven't moved from this spot, so he isn't actually dodging the attacks, he's deflecting Jabber's movements, and that means he knows exactly where Jabber is going to end up. Jabber runs at Rudo again, but while he may be right about the talisman not being able to attack, Rudo's still got hands, and while Jabber is gearing up to strike, he suddenly feels his trajectory shift, and on his way down, he gets punched in the face at full force. He wasn't expecting to get socked out of nowhere like that. It really hurts, but it's also getting him excited because it has been a while since someone has given him this much of a challenge. Rudo says he's just doing what Jabber asked for since he wanted to have some fun before taking him in, and right now Rudo's having a lot of fun, so he's going to keep punching Jabber's face in until he's a bloody mess on the floor. Jabber admits that Rudo is a lot better than he expected since he has effectively rigged the game against him, and even though this is kind of like cheating, Rudo doesn't feel even the slightest bit of guilt about it. Jabber tries to speed blitz Rudo, but his movements are still redirected, putting him in the perfect position to be punched again, so he has to switch up tactics. He tries creating a dust cloud to obscure the eye's vision, but the second he tries to attack Rudo, he still ends up getting stunned, so he'll have to try something else. He slices up one of the pillars nearby and throws the chunks at Rudo, so Rudo is forced to cover himself and dodge, and while he's distracted, Jabber tries to sneak up on him by hiding behind one of the pillar pieces, but that doesn't work out as well as he plans since as soon as he gets close, the eye spots him and he is stunned again. But he does manage to gain a crucial bit of information from this, so he's more than ready to continue. He begins dashing around the room at high speeds in an attempt to disorient Rudo. But no matter what angle he comes from, his attacks are always stopped and Rudo always counters with a devastating punch. Jabber is sent stumbling backwards until he falls over against a wall, and he is having the time of his life right now. He can't remember the last time he took a beating like this, so it has been fun, but he thinks it's time that Rudo got to taste the same thing, so he's going to stop messing around. He noticed something about Rudo's vital instrument during the fight earlier. It protects Rudo by diverting anything with hostile intent against him, which is why when he threw the rubble at Rudo, the eye didn't do anything to stop it. It can't stop things that don't have any hostile intent against Rudo, so that gave Jabber an idea. He shows Rudo his vital instrument and tells him his claws have a nasty neurotoxin built into them, so he wouldn't want to get stabbed by these babies. He then proceeds to stab himself with his claws, and Rudo has no idea why he's doing it. But Jabber begins laughing hysterically and tells Rudo that once the neurotoxins make it to his brain, he's going to be so high he won't even know what's real anymore. You can't have hostile intent if you can't think at all. So once he goes into a violent, thoughtless frenzy, Rudo's guardian eye won't be able to do a damn thing to stop him. Moments later, Jabber passes out, and for a while, he just lies there unconscious, so Rudo isn't sure what to do. But then his eyes snap back open, and he goes absolutely feral. Rudo barely manages to dodge Jabber's initial attack, and he can't believe this is really happening because how the hell does Jabber stabbing himself make him stronger? He takes a moment to think, and that's when he spots Gris and Folo over to the side. It'd be really bad if Jabber turned his attention to them, so Rudo needs to move the fight away from here to ensure their safety. He starts running across the room, and just as expected, the frenzied Jabber chases after him to attack, but when Rudo tries to deflect Jabber's slash, the eye can't register at all, so it's pretty much useless now. Luckily, Rudo manages to catch Jabber's claw and flung him away, but even though he skids a good 10 feet flat on his face, Jabber still isn't staying down. Rudo's starting to wonder what kind of freak Jabber is to be willing to subject himself to so much pain just to get to Rudo. He thinks back to a time when he was getting bullied by some kids up in the sphere, and they kept calling him a masochist for letting them hit him over and over. Rudo doesn't like getting hit, he just didn't want to get in trouble back then. But if Jabber really is a masochist, then fighting him could get really weird, and Rudo would rather not get any white sticky surprises mid-fight. Jabber lunges at Rudo again, and his rampage is so uncontrollable that it slices a bunch of the pillars holding this place up into pieces. All the falling debris makes it difficult for Rudo to dodge effectively, so he eventually gets cornered. However, just as Jabber's claws are closing in on Rudo's face, Zanka's staff comes flying out of nowhere and pins Jabber's neck to the ground, stopping him from rampaging any further. Zanka then turns around the corner and he still feels terrible after that dose of poison Jabber gave him, so he asks Rudo to let him handle the fighting because there's no way he's going to let Jabber get away with this. Rudo asks Zanka if he's sure he's alright because he looks awful right now, but Zanka says he's back on his feet, and that's all that matters. On a side note, he congratulates Rudo for finally learning how to use his vital instrument, but as cool as it is, Jabber has already figured out how to counter it, so the talisman won't be of much help anymore. Zanka actually got here a while ago, but Rudo seemed to be handling things pretty well at the time, so he didn't want to interrupt. Or at least that's what he'd like to say, but in reality, the poison made it really harder for him to move, so he couldn't keep up with them. With that said, he does have an idea to make up for his lack of mobility, so he asks Rudo to let him whack him. Rudo has no idea what Zanka is talking about, so he explains that he's too slow to keep up with Jabber, but since Rudo's weapon can redirect attacks, he figures that if he tries to hit Rudo, then Rudo can redirect his attack towards Jabber. That sounds like a solid plan, but if Zanka is wrong, then Rudo's going to get whacked in the face for nothing. And that's a sacrifice Zanka is willing to make. Just then, Jabber manages to break free from Zanka's staff, so he charges at the two of them, and they are forced to run away to avoid getting slashed. Zanka warns Rudo to make sure to avoid those claws at all costs, because a single scratch from Jabber would be enough to make him a vegetable. They are out of time and out of options, so Zanka raises his staff and prepares to whack Rudo over the head, but just as expected, the talisman redirects his attack and Rudo sends him right in front of Jabber so he can knock the crap out of him. Zanka is genuinely surprised that his plan actually worked, but Rudo doesn't appreciate the fact that Zanka was putting his face at risk for a plan he wasn't sure would work. Zanka tells him it's not that big of a deal since the plan did end up working, so for now, they should just focus on beating Jabber. Rudo reluctantly agrees, so he flings Zanka forward again, and Zanka uses the momentum to knock Jabber's face straight into the ground. Zanka is loving the speed Rudo's ability has, and together, they beat Jabber so bad that he comes back to his senses after getting slammed into a wall, just in time to experience Zanka caving his skull in with his staff. After that, Zanka assumes Jabber won't be getting up anytime soon, so he goes back to the ground and collapses from exhaustion. Rudo also calms down, but as soon as he deactivates his powers, the talisman begins to disintegrate, and he is left devastated because it was something that Gris treasured deeply, and he didn't mean to destroy it. Zanka is just as surprised as Rudo, and he wonders if there's some kind of time limit on the weapons Rudo's vital instrument creates, or if it's something else entirely. You can see that Rudo is really freaking out, so he tries to calm him down. But then Rudo collapses, and Zanka realizes this isn't an ordinary panic attack. Somehow, in all the chaos of the fight, Jabber managed to scratch Rudo with one of his claws, and that's what sent him into shock. To make matters worse, Zanka hears a sound behind him, and when he looks back, he sees Jabber spring back to his feet. Jabber says he hasn't had this much fun in a long time. Granted, he was unconscious for most of the fight, so he's not exactly sure what happened, but judging by the fact that he's the only one left standing, he figures he must have done a number on them. Zanka doesn't understand how Jabber is still standing after the beating he just gave him, so Jabber bends down next to him and says he has his left claw to thank for that. Zanka's eyes grow wide because if Jabber's claws can really heal him, then he's practically unstoppable. But Jabber laughs and tells him his claws can't heal a thing. He's still got all his injuries, but his left claw produces a numbing venom which in the right dose can make all his pain go away, so as long as he's not dead, he can keep fighting without restraint. With that said, he compliments Zanka because he ended up doing a lot more damage than Jabber expected he'd be able to, but as much as he'd like to continue the fight, Jabber still has a job to do. He's still got a kid to kidnap, and he can't risk Zanka getting his way again, so he gives him another dose of poison to keep him down. He then throws Rudo over his shoulder and waves goodbye to Zanka before leaving him alone in the dark. As he is running, Jabber realizes he was in such a rush that he forgot to check on Grim and Kanza, but then again, he kind of doesn't care about those two anyway, so he's not turning back for them. While Rudo is slung over Jabber's shoulder, he is fully aware of everything going on around him, but he can't move or fight back at all, and he hates the fact that he's still just as useless as he was before. Jabber finds the hole that they came in through and jumps out, but he's a little confused when he gets back to the surface because he could have sworn there was a building here a minute ago. He then turns around and sees Rio staring daggers at him, and a moment later, Engine shows up and gut checks the hell out of Jabber. But this is just the beginning, because after everything Jabber has done, they aren't letting him off that easy. The raiders lured Rudo here with a fake mission, dragged him down to a sub-level so they wouldn't be able to call for backup, and then they ambushed them. That's as cowardly as it gets, but luckily Tomoya got out before Jabber arrived and was able to send a distress signal. Otherwise, Engine would never have made it here in time. Tomoya is on the verge of tears because with how beat up Rudo is, Grizz and the others are probably in even worse condition, so it may already be too late. Engine pats her on the head and says she doesn't have to worry too much because those guys won't die so easily, but they are definitely going to need help, so he tells Tomoya to get down there as soon as she can. Jabber stumbles back to his feet, and the thought of the beating he's about to get has him so excited he's practically shaking with anticipation. Rio goes to check on Rudo, and she tells him he did a good job hanging in there since he's in better shape than she thought he'd be. Though he's still writhing in pain and barely able to move, so things could have been better. Engine stares Jabber down and tells him he's going to pay for doing this to Rudo, and Jabber can't think of anything more fun than going all out against them. But he has orders to follow, and his boss was very insistent about his capturing Rudo. He can't go back until he has Rudo, so even though he's running on fumes right now, there's no way he's backing down. However, just as he's about to charge at the cleaners, he is suddenly grabbed by Chthoni, a fellow raider. She tells him that time's up, so he needs to come back to the base immediately. Jabber tells her to get off him since he can't leave without getting Rudo, but she points out that Jabber's never going to make it through the cleaners in his current state, and besides, the boss was smiling when he told her to come get him. Jabber was totally ready to rip his way through the cleaners or die trying, but as soon as he heard that the boss was smiling, he goes, "Understandable, have a nice day." He's usually not one to run away from a fight, but this is a special case, so he's leaving. He turns to Rudo and tells him he's not bad for a lousy goblin-faced spirit, but then he realizes Rudo probably won't be able to hear him because that poison was pretty strong. He tells the others to let Rudo know what he said when he gets up, but to Jabber's surprise, Rudo is actually conscious right now. He's really impressed since his poison should be strong enough to keep a bear down. But Rudo still has the energy to look Jabber right in the eyes and threaten to rip him limb from limb for what he did to Grizz. By now, you should know Jabber loves those kinds of threats, so he can't wait to meet Rudo again. However, while he's looking at Rudo, he notices a pattern on Rudo's gloves, and he has definitely seen that somewhere before. He thinks about it for a moment, and then he gets really excited because he realizes Rudo's gloves are from a particularly interesting series. He can't wait to let his boss know about this, so he and Chthoni crawl through the manhole portal she created, and as he's leaving, he tells Rudo he will be back for him. The manhole cover then closes behind him and the portal disappears, so it looks like that's the last they'll see of the raiders for a while, but Rudo is left wondering what Jabber meant when he said his gloves were part of series. A little while later, everyone is taking a break after the crazy events, and the supporters have pulled Grizz out from the sub-level so they can treat his wounds. Rudo is fully recovered from the poison by now, so he rushes over to check on Grizz, but it doesn't look like he's gonna make it. Rudo apologizes to Grizz for not being able to save him and for ruining the talisman that he treasured so much. Grizz says he put a lot of care into that thing, and hearing that makes Rudo feel even worse, but Grizz adds that if the talisman was helpful to Rudo at all, then it was all worth it, so he's not upset about it turning to dust. What's important is that Rudo made it out alive, so with his last breath, he tells him he did a good job. They eventually return to Cleaner HQ, and Rudo is still majorly bummed after what happened to Grizz. Engine comes over and tries to cheer him up by starting a conversation with him, and starts congratulating Rudo for figuring out how to use his vital instrument, but Rudo tells him to shut up because he doesn't want to be cheered up right now. Grizz was killed in front of him, just like Recto, and all he could do was watch it happen. He thought he had become better, but in the end, he always ends up screwing everything up. Engine can understand why Rudo feels like he's to blame, but what happened to Grizz wasn't his fault. Grizz was well aware of all the risks involved when he made his choice, and that had nothing to do with Rudo. That's just who Grizz is. He asked Rudo if he wants to come along to pay his respects, but when Rudo follows Engine, he can't believe what he's seeing because Grizz looks awfully lively for a dead person. He rubs his eyes to make sure he's not seeing a ghost or something, but no, Grizz is very much alive. Engine and Tomoe start teasing Rudo for thinking Grizz was really dead and getting so upset without bothering to check first, but in Rudo's defense, he saw Jabber's claws go straight through Grizz's chest, and that's not something people usually walk away from. Grizz admits that it was a really close call, but thanks to the awesome work of Aisha, he managed to pull through. She's the only giver that got who has healing powers, so without her, Grizz definitely would have died. Aisha feels embarrassed getting praised so much, so she tries to tell him it wasn't a big deal, but Grizz says she should be proud of herself because without a doubt, she saved your life today. Also, he notices that Folov has been looking gloomy lately, so he tells him he doesn't need to feel bad about what happened. If he hadn't jumped in and gotten Grizz out of the danger zone, then he probably wouldn't have survived long enough for Aisha to heal him. He also wants to thank Rudo for everything he did to hold Jabber off, and he tells him he really doesn't need to worry about the talisman getting destroyed because it being useful in Rudo's fight against the raiders means it fulfilled his purpose. On that note, Engine tells everyone that this probably won't be their last encounter with the raiders, so they'll need to be more cautious in the future. But on the bright side, they learned something new because one of the raiders mentioned something about crossing the border. Just then, a man walks up behind them and says that must mean the raiders are doing research into the sphere, and this man's apparently the boss of the cleaners. He apologizes for being away when Rudo first got here, so he walks up to him and introduces himself as Archer Corvus, the leader of the cleaners. He heard that Rudo initially planned to just use them until he gets what he wants, and normally that would be reason enough for Archer to kick him out right now, but in the short time Rudo has been here, he has not only helped them on missions, but also risked his life to protect one of their own. Rudo also has an interesting ability that could be very useful to their cause, so Archer officially welcomes him as the newest member of the Cleaners. Now that that's out of the way, Archer asks Rudo to follow him back to his office because he has some new clothes and info to give him. Once Rudo and Archer are alone, he explains that the border is the area that lies between the ground and the sphere. It is said that all who try to cross the border end up dead, but Archer came across an interesting story recently. It's about a traveler who happened to be wandering through a no-man's land. Even though that area was supposed to be a death trap, the traveler found a woman living there. He asked her why she would stay in such a god-forsaken place, and the woman explained that she stays here so she can bear witness as the spheroids fall from above, because sometimes they don't just fall, they come and go as they please. From the sound of the story, the woman must have seen other people just like Rudo who survived the fall, and that's good enough for the lead for Rudo. If that story is true, then he just needs to find one of the other survivors and ask them how to cross the border. He might even figure out how he managed to survive the fall in the first place. But to do that, he's going to need to find that woman first, and that's definitely going to be dangerous. But Rudo isn't willing to give up. He immediately tries heading into the no man's land on his own so he can find the woman, but Folo is holding him back because going out alone at a time like this is crazy. However, Rudo is really strong, so Folo isn't actually doing much to stop him. Just as Rudo is about to make it to the front gate, Engine comes out and tells him to cool his jets for a second unless he's trying to get himself killed. First off, he asks Rudo if he really thinks it's a good idea to go into no man's land on his own because he of all people should know how messed up that place is. Sure, he may know how to activate his vital instrument now, but aside from that, he's got no idea what the strengths or weaknesses of his ability may be. And if he doesn't know what he can do, then his teammates won't know how to help him. Rudo pauses for a moment and asks if that means Engine and the others are going to come with him, and Engine tells him that was the plan all along since going into no man's land alone is practically a death sentence. With that said, Engine tells Rudo that he'd be much better off taking today as a rest day since he needs a break from all the crazy stuff that's been happening lately. Rudo decides to follow Engine's advice, but no one actually told him how he's supposed to relax. He already tried taking a nap, but that didn't work, so he's not sure what to do anymore. Just then, Rio barges into Rudo's room and tells him to get up because she's going to give him a tour of Cleaner HQ. Rudo hasn't actually had a chance to look around yet, so he goes with her, and she shows him all the facilities they have, including the gym, cafeteria, and bathroom. It may look run down, but everything here is fully functional, which is a little more than Rudo had when he was up in the sphere. Out of curiosity, Rio asks Rudo what he had up there, so he explains that all he had was pretty much a tiny room with nothing to do but pick up trash or get yelled at. Rio also asks him what he got to eat there, so Rudo explains that it was just the usual stuff like bread and soup, but then Rio asks him what he had for dessert and Rudo freezes up. He says he's never tried any sweets because only rich people can afford that stuff, but it just so happens that they've got some sweets right here in HQ, so Rio asks Rudo if he'd like to try some. She takes Rudo to the room with all the sweets and she explains that the Cleaners buy their food from a group called the Vianders, so sometimes they get hooked up with the good stuff. Rudo still can't believe that there's this much rich people food in one place or that it's just here for anyone to take. So Engine explains that it's not actually that hard to get. The pollution makes it difficult to grow anything down here, but the Vianders have a lot of givers who specialize in cooking, and thanks to them, the ground probably has more tasty treats going around than the entire sphere does. Rudo hasn't been able to take his eyes off the sweets since he got here, so Rio tells him he doesn't have to hold back, he can have as much as he wants. As soon as Rudo tastes one of the sweets, he loses his mind and starts scarfing them all down. Rio kind of expected him to react like this, but it's still really funny to see him stuffing his face with such intensity. Just then, one of the kids on the team, Dear Santa, walks up to Rudo, and he's giving him the stink eye. Rudo has no idea what this kid's problem is at first, but then he realizes that he probably wants some sweets too. Rudo reluctantly hands over a lollipop even though he really doesn't want to share, but the kid rudely snatches it out of his hand and then demands even more. A few hours later, Zenka is walking through the halls when he overhears Engine and Rio talking about how crazy Rudo went when he found out they have a whole storeroom full of sweets. Rio says she had no idea he'd like them that much, but it's good that Rudo found something he enjoys. Too bad they're out of sweets now though. Hearing that gets Zenka curious, so he goes to find Rudo, but when he gets to his room he finds a massive bowling ball rolling right at him, and that's what Rudo looks like after downing a month's worth of sweets in one sitting. Fortunately, Aisha's healing also works on morbidly obese people, so the next day, Rudo is back to normal and can begin his training. They all gather out in the courtyard and Rudo tries to activate his ability with a knife, but it doesn't seem to be working. He knows what it's supposed to feel like, but there must be something he's missing. Zanka realizes Rudo needs a little help, so it gets his attention and reminds Rudo that a person's personality plays an intricate part in how their vital instrument's ability manifests. In Rudo's case, he cares a lot about fixing up trash, but you can't fix something that isn't broken, so maybe they need to try a different approach. Zanka gets a pile of garbage and asks Rudo to grab something and try activating his power again. Rudo follows Zanka's advice and picks up a triangle. and this time his power successfully turns it into a vital instrument. Everyone is amazed by how effective Zanka's advice was, so Engine tells him he's an incredible teacher. Zanka is honored to have Engine think so highly of him, but he plays it cool and tells Rudo to try making some more instruments. He wasn't really expecting Rudo to be able to handle more than one, but Rudo is able to activate a teapot, and then a doll after that. Rudo's ability seems way too overpowered since so far they haven't seen any drawbacks, but then blood spurts out from Rudo's nose and he falls to the ground. Basically, Rudo can't use his power too many times without his body giving out, but still Engine says the quality of Rudo's gloves must be really high for it to do that much damage to his body after only 3 uses. Love and care are what give a vital instrument its power, and the more time spent with a vital instrument, the stronger it gets. That's what improving its quality is all about, and makes sense that Rudo's gloves would have high quality considering the fact that he's been taking care of them ever since he was a kid, but it's still weird that it knocked him out so quickly. Zanka thinks the backlash might have more to do with the series that the gloves are from rather than the quality, but he can't be sure of that right now. Once Rudo gets back up, he asks the others if they know why the items he turned into vital instruments before ended up disintegrating afterwards, but the ones he made just now seem to be fine. He was even able to make multiple in a row, so he's wondering if there's some kind of time limit. Rio speaks up and says she thinks the objects only disintegrate when they have accomplished their purpose. For example, with Grizz's talisman, it only disappeared once Rudo thought he was safe, so it had fulfilled its purpose and was laid to rest. Engine thinks Rudo's power is more than just turning discarded objects into vital instruments. It's about giving those objects a second chance to fulfill their purpose. Learning the true nature of his power gives Rudo a lot to think about, but while they are on the topic of Rudo's gloves, Rio asks what all this series business is because she heard Jabber mention something about Rudo's gloves being a part of a special series. Rudo has never heard of a vital instrument series before, but he assumes that means there are more vital instruments like his out there. Early the next morning, Rudo is in the bathroom washing his gloves, but since he has to take them off to clean them, the wounds on his arms are giving him hell. It takes a while, but once he's done washing them, he grabs a towel and heads back to his room, but to his surprise, he finds Rio lying on his bed waiting for him. Rudo thinks Rio is cool and all, but this is skipping way too many steps, so he asks her what she's doing in his room so early in the morning. In fact, she shouldn't have been able to get in here at all since his door is locked. Rio explains that her room is the one right above Rudo's, and she could hear him moaning and groaning for the past couple of minutes, so she climbed in through his window to come see if he's alright. She asks him if it has anything to do with the wounds on his hands, and as soon as she mentions that, Rudo pulls his arms behind his back. His gloves help with the pain for the most part, but he still needs to take them off every now and then to clean them, so he just has to power through it. Rio tells him it's nothing to be ashamed of, but those don't look like any injuries she's seen before, so she asks him how it happened. Rudo says the only people who know what's wrong with him are his shitty parents because they're the ones who left him like this. Since Rudo is fine, Rio gets ready to leave, but before she does, she lets him know that she understands how it feels to have terrible parents, so he's not alone. That same morning, the others go to check on the resident artist as well since they could hear weird noises coming from his room, and he is currently living the life of a Mappa animator, no sunlight, no family, and tons of work, so the others decide to leave him alone. A few hours later, Rudo and Engine go to meet Arker at the front desk, and since Rudo's full face isn't done yet, Arker suggests they should head out to finish the rest of his prep first. Rudo is totally in the dark here, so he asks Engine what a full face is, and he explains that it's basically a mask that all cleaners are obligated to wear when they head into no man's lands. They've got an artist among the ranks who's in charge of making all the masks and clothes they wear here, and he was supposed to have Rudo's mask ready by now. But when they went to check on him, he looked completely deranged, so he's probably really immersed in his art right now. They don't want to rush him since he gets really upset whenever they force a deadline on him, which is why they'll be doing Rudo's final prep first. As for what the final prep actually is, Semiyu explains that there are a lot of things that could go wrong in a no man's land, so to minimize the risks involved, they are basically going to get a particular giver to put a spell on Rudo to ensure his safety. Arker lets the guy paint the walls of the cleaner HQ occasionally, so he comes and goes every now and then, but he hasn't been here in a while, and there's no telling when he'll be back. Engine is a little disappointed to hear that since now they have to drive out to go find him, and that means they'll be heading into Canvas Town. But before they hit the road, Engine wants to show Rudo the team that'll be going with them. From the Amuta division, there's Zanka and Rio, and from the Eevir division, we have Tamzi and Delman. As for the supporters, they've got the reliable Grizz, Folo, and Tomoe. Normally they get 5 supporters for the mission, but since they'll be heading into no man's land, they had to cut back on the number of non-powered team members. After Engine is done with his explanation, Delman approaches Rudo, and in the loudest voice Rudo has ever heard, he says he heard all about his story, and he thinks what those spirits did to him is unforgivable. He loves people with passion like Rudo, so he invites him to join the Eevir division, but Tamzi tells Delman to cool his jets because Engine was the one who recruited Rudo, so he's automatically a member of the Akuta division. But speaking of passion, Engine asks Delman if he can give one of his famous passion-filled speeches, and as soon as he hears that, he goes into full swing and starts yelling words of encouragement to everyone in the room. and the spirit is so infectious that even Rudo joins in on the yelling. Afterwards, they all pile into the car and begin the long drive to the canvas town, and once they pull up to the main entrance, Rudo asks Tamsi if all cities down on the surface have huge domes like this. Tamsi tells him the dome is something only big cities can afford to build, and the main purpose of the dome is to keep the trash from the sky out. Every so often, a load of garbage is dumped down from the sphere over a random location. And if you're unlucky enough to get caught in one without shelter, you're pretty much dead. Rudo feels a little guilty that the sphere is causing so much suffering down here, but Tamsi tells him he doesn't need to let it bother him too much because he wasn't the one dumping the trash on them. At the city entrance, there are two guys who are trying to get in, but for some reason, even though the gate is wide open, whenever they try to get in, an invisible wall keeps them out. Just then, Engine and the others walk past the two, and the invisible wall doesn't seem to care about them at all. Rudo is really confused after what he just witnessed, and he's not sure what the rules are for entering the city, but Engine tells him he doesn't have to think about it too much. Basically, as long as you don't plan on doing any bad stuff like kidnapping or organ trafficking, you can walk through the gate no problem. Rudo takes Engine's advice, and sure enough, he's able to walk through the gate effortlessly. But those guys over there ain't getting in anytime soon. Upon entering the city, Rudo sees practically every wall covered in all manners of graffiti, and he's curious about it, so Engine gives him a little history lesson. There are many people who want to express themselves through art, but there are also many people who don't appreciate art. So it is said that Canvas Town was founded to give all the creative people on the surface a place to express themselves without restraint. He'd love to spend the day looking at all the art, but they are here to meet a particular artist, Gob. He's the only one who can give them their tags, and they are going to need all the protection they can get. Rudo understands that, but he's still not sure how a couple of tags are going to protect them out on their mission, so Engine gives him a little example. Basically, Gob puts a feeling like, I want to negate all damage from surprise attacks into his drawings, and thanks to his vital instrument, the effect becomes a reality. Another good example is the gate out front. The reason those two dipsticks couldn't get in was because Gob drew the spell, don't let any troublemaking jerks in, all along the outer wall, so the crime rate is really low in here. Rudo thinks Gob's vital instrument sounds way too overpowered because he can basically do whatever he wants with it. And yes, its ability is pretty rare, but Engine explains that technically, a vital instrument doesn't belong to Gob. He's about to explain that it was actually handed down to Gob from the previous user, but all of a sudden, a little girl comes running around the corner and bumps into Engine. She falls to the ground as a result, and Engine goes to check if she's alright, but then he notices that she's got tears in her eyes, and before he can say anything to her, she runs off. This makes him feel terrible because he thinks he's the reason she started crying, but while the others are teasing him over it, Engine notices the mayor of Canvas Town walking out of the alley. He's surprised to see him here since the mayor is usually at home around this time. Engine says he's here looking for Gob, but with a sullen expression, the mayor tells him that Gob actually dead this morning. Engine is shocked and can't believe what he just heard, so the mayor takes him to go see Gob's body, and he's definitely dead. The cause of death was pollution poisoning because he was the kind of guy who followed his inspiration wherever it led him, and a lot of the time it led him straight into a polluted zone. He would also often forget to wear his mask out there, even though the mayor kept reminding him to wear it. Rudo never really spoke to Gob, but he does remember seeing him paint a wall in the HQ when he first arrived, and he feels incredibly guilty over his death because the only reason he died was due to all the trash that the sphere keeps dropping down here. Tamsi can tell what Rudo must be thinking, so he tells him he really doesn't have to blame himself for this because people die from pollution poisoning all the time down here. The mayor speaks up and tells Engine that Job has already picked out a successor to inherit his vital instrument, and that successor is Remlin, the little girl from earlier. This is the way it has always been. The user of the pen chooses a successor to carry on their work after they are gone. And once it has been passed on, the abilities are automatically inherited as well, making them the spellcaster of Canvas Town. The mayor knows that Remlin is an exceptional artist and Gob made the right choice picking her as his successor. But the wielder of the pen essentially becomes the spokesperson of Canvas City, and the mayor isn't sure if it's right to put such a responsibility on the shoulders of a child. On top of that, simply inheriting the power will probably make things difficult for her. When most givers awaken their vital instrument, it's only after years of care and affection for it, so using it comes naturally to them, but in Remlin's case, she's going to have to learn to use it on her own. The mayor apologizes to Engine since he knows he must have been in a rush, but it looks like he'll have to put a hold on getting those spells for a while. Engine tells him there's nothing to apologize for, and right now, honoring Gob's memory is more important, so their mission can weigh a little. Gob brought everyone here so much joy with the things he created, but the mayor isn't an artist like him. He could never make the things Gob could, which is why he became the mayor of this town to protect those who see the wonder in the world like Gob did. The first time Engine ever met Gob, he was tagging one of the walls outside Cleaner HQ, and when he got caught, he looked really pleased with the art he had created and ran off to go paint another wall somewhere. Engine's going to miss that part of Gob the most, but you should probably get out of the mayor's hair for a while. Since they are leaving, he turns to Remlin and says goodbye, but she doesn't respond to him at all. He assumes she probably just needs time to get her feelings in order, but all of a sudden, she gets up and yells that she's done sulking. She then grabs the marker from the mayor and runs out onto the roof to start setting something up. The others follow her up there, and she explains that Gob's death hurts a lot to think about, but he won't be able to enjoy the afterlife if they are all miserable down here. So she wants to send him off with a bang. She activates the power of the pen, and with it, she creates a little memorial for Gob, setting off a ton of fireworks for everyone in the city to see. The sight of all the pretty colors reminds Rudo of the time he had spent with Regto, and it inspires the people to start partying and painting all across the city streets. Remlin then sits back and watches everyone having fun because this is exactly what she had envisioned. After all, there's no better way to honor an artist as good as Gob than to have his memory inspire others. This was the end of episode 9. Subscribe to not miss the next part.